Today, I'm so excited. If it's 11 a.m. Eastern time, it's LinkedIn Live 7 days a week. If you don't know where to find it, you can catch it on my profile. With that said, I am so honored to have such a blue ribbon uh, group today with Bryan being with us. I don't know if you know Bryan Sagray. Great guy. Everybody that comes on the show, I've had an opportunity to talk to for an extended period of time, got to know. I believe bringing the best value one can is so key to not only retaining an audience, but building an audience and getting better as you go. With that said, we're starting to bring topics into the conversation. And uh, today's topic was by Charles Caldwell, who's with us, a real honor, building a powerful relationship with failure. With that said, the audience is key. You know, we're here for you. We're here to support you, be more relevant to what your issues are right now, because this is a real time opportunity. And want to just recognize a few people really quick before we get started. We've got Isa here. Thank you for coming. Paul's here. Paul's here almost every day he can. Hi, Don, Bryan, and Charles. Happy Saturday. Great seeing you. Prento's here. Charles is typing already. Thank you, Charles. Good morning, everyone. Greetings from Hong Kong. And with that said, I'll continue to honor and recognize comments as they come in. So please be prodigious. More questions, more answers. With that, let me turn it over to Bryan. Give him a chance to introduce himself. I mean, I think when you get to know Bryan better, you're going to find out what a special day this is. So, Bryan, why don't you share a little?
Yeah, good to be here, Don. Thanks again for having us on the show. So Don and I met about a week ago, and he decided to have me on the show just to kind of share my message. I'm originally from Texas, and I'm living back here in Texas now. So right now I am working on building something out on LinkedIn that I'll be hopefully offering you guys pretty soon. I can't really give a lot of details as to what that's going to look like yet, but if you've been to my profile at all recently, you can already start to see some of the tweaks that I'm making on my profile to kind of showcase what I'm going to be doing. But basically, with my background in surgery, entrepreneurship, running businesses, and then founding a few different companies, I also was a professional athlete and a runner at a national and international level for a while as a sponsored athlete. And so I'm going to basically be taking all these different things that I've done in my life and sort of weaving them together and being able to try to help people on LinkedIn to live and off LinkedIn, of course, to live a life with more intention and more purpose through not just wellness, exercise and nutrition, but reconnecting sort of with nature and focusing on how sometimes in life simple is often the best way. And, you know, I truly believe that less is more. And so that's kind of my passion and my goal. And I'm excited to be here and just, take questions and learn from everybody.
Well, that's great. We're so honored to have you, Bryan. And with that, I'll turn it over to Charles. For those who don't know him, give him an opportunity to share a little bit about himself and kind of why he chose the topic and how we can build on that. Charles?
Yeah, thanks very much, Don. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, depending on where you're calling in from or where you're watching from. I'm Charles. I'm based in Hong Kong. I've been in Hong Kong for coming up to 27 years. I work for a large education system called English Schools Foundation. We run 22 schools in Hong Kong from kindergarten to year 13, primarily offer the IB curriculum, but that includes early years program, primary years program, middle years program. And ESF is a really exciting organization to work for. We're doing great things in the education space. And I love LinkedIn, and I guess you could say it's my hobby and where a bit of a place where I can share ideas I have on leadership and motivation, inspiration, and how people can be successful. So to answer your question, Don, about how we came up with the idea or how I came up with the idea of people need a powerful relationship to failure. I think that that's something I have learned over time. And if I was to look back to the start of my career, I wish that someone had actually sat me down and suggested that I get to understand that concept, because it's something that's taken me a while to grasp. And obviously, I've had lots of failures, highs and lows in my career, and I look back at some of the bigger lows and the deeper lows, and it's taken me time to recover from them. So I think that one of the reasons it's so important that people have a good relationship with failure, a couple of reasons for that. So one reason is that society tends to stigmatize failure. So, or people think it stigmatizes failure, so that when people experience a failure, they think to themselves, "Oh my gosh, this is terrible. It's going to make me look bad. You know, how am I going to recover from this?" And that causes people to go into a stall. And over time, when they have spent time in the stall, they start to come out of the stall, and they might come out of the stall in a couple of days, a couple of weeks, a couple of months, and in some cases, it could take people years to come out of the stall. And then they look back and they realize that they learned from the failure. So failure is one of those things that plays tricks on us when it comes to time. So we look ahead into the future. If you look at time from a linear perspective, you look ahead into the future after a failure and you think, "Oh my gosh, this is going to be the end of my career." But then a while later, months or years, you look back and you realize that actually the failure helped you to grow and learn something and to succeed even more in the failure. So this whole concept of having a good relationship with failure is very, very important for people to learn about, for lots of reasons that we're going to talk about in the next hour.
Well, it sounds terrific, and it's easier, I guess, to look back than to look forward. So, looking back at all my failures, they kind of wove together, if that's a good word, with the rest of my life. I mean, what I've always started to appreciate is failure is feedback, and failure isn't final, right? It's just a post or a sign or a signal where you are, you know. When you lose everything, it just means you lost everything. There's another saying that says, "I've been broke, but I've never been broken." And I think that's so important. And whatever you were doing a lot of and focusing a lot of, you're free of that, right? So not only have you lost a thing, you lost what it took to maintain, support, and take care of it. And if it wasn't doing very well, it wasn't probably a very pleasant situation. So I think life tells people where the change should be if they'll listen to it and accept it. Because I think, to Charles's point, you can't unring a bell, right? Whatever's happened is done, right? It's in the books. It's really how you want to view it and how long you want to view it. And I think that's important. So Bryan, what's your thoughts on looking at your experiences and how this pertains?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the most important thing is that, you hear a lot of people nowadays talk about how failure is like super important, and how, without failure, you wouldn't have your success. And so I think the most important thing to realize is that when people say that, it's not insinuating that the goal should be to fail, right? So that you can just grow from that failure. I think the point for me is realizing that, I sort of think of it as like a stepping stone. So I always use an analogy that a lot of us go out to eat, go to restaurants all the time. Most of the time when you go to a restaurant over your life, you'll have thousands of great experiences at restaurants. And you'll probably have a handful of really, really bad experiences whether it was the service, the food, the environment, just something went really, really wrong. And so I know for me, I tend to remember those much more commonly than I remember the thousands of good ones, right? And so the way I look at it is, although we're not striving for failure, we're obviously striving for the next destination, the next, small win, the next thing that we can do to move forward in this journey of life. We can't undermine, how much reflection and how much growth can come from a setback. And so to me, it's just about learning the difference between, not necessarily trying to fail, but just knowing that it's something that all of us will do. And that the most important thing is, when you fail, to recognize why you failed, to try not to repeat that failure, and then to learn that the first solution to failure is just getting back up and doing it again and moving forward.
Yeah, and I think what it really comes down to is who defines failure for you. When do you fall into that bucket? What does it take to get out of that bucket? Because it's just a label about a
Right.
situation, right? And what you say is what you also hear and what you factor in. So I knew, I had a great CFO 30 years ago that was very careful on semantics, because I'd always come in and say, I've got a problem with this. He says, no, you have an opportunity for a positive change. So how you phrase things. A child by the time they're 5 has heard no 20,000 times and yes 5,000 times, right? So if someone could
Correct.
turn around the yeses to the no's to say, boy, that was so smart of you not to touch the stove and get burned, versus get away from there, don't do that. People are put in their spots because of their environment and the people around them. And I think that's where, and I've talked to this, and it's starting to become more obvious, the answers to almost all of people's situations can be supported and helped by peer-to-peer connection and support, right? So if the 20 people that care about you are with you, and to a show like this where it's every day, and 80 to 90% of the people are here every day, it's a continuum, right? From the
Right.
day before, and you build on it. So no different, you go to the gym today and you work out on something. When you come to work out on that next something again, you're a little stronger for it. And then if everybody's a little stronger and they do it collectively, the exponential benefit that one can derive and the speed in which one can get that support and help is so important. So I think we're on to something really significant, not just the medium that we're using, but how we're putting groups together, like-minded support groups. And I say, just out of benefit, I guess Nicole wrote a book that seems to be #1 in a lot of places. I've talked to Nicole, and it's so great how we're kind of cross-pollinating, with Raquel's group, and all these. Mike has been so instrumental to help so many people. And what's so interesting about combining circles, when you combine 2 circles, both of them get bigger. But more importantly, on LinkedIn, you'd be surprised how few cross representation there is between connections. I had
Right.
somebody on that had 31,000, I had 36. Only about, I think, 1,500 were alike, and we're doing the same thing. So all of a sudden, you got 62,000 more people watching both of you than the same people watching you. So Bryan, you said that's right. What are you? What's your thoughts?
Well, the other thing I like to think about too is those overlapping circles, or, like a lot of us are in different industries, but I like to think about it too as building bridges to different industries, because just because you may not be, in one industry now or looking to connect with those people now, you may be later. And so I like what you mentioned, bringing like-minded people together. And I think it really is important to have people that share a certain mission or a certain vision. But I just want to emphasize that from my standpoint, I think it's really powerful too when you bring unlike mind people together, or when you bring people together that have different thought processes, or you bring people together that have different ways of reaching a solution, as long as their mission or their vision is the same. Because I've found over my career that if you put 100 people in a room and they all think the same way, then sometimes that doesn't get you as far as having, say, 50 people that all have the same vision in mind, but they're all working towards the same goal, and they're all thinking about it in a different way. So, and that person who just put up that quote about Thomas Edison, that's a great quote right there that I think really envisions a lot about what failure truly means.
Well, that's Charles, by the way. But I think to your point, you're so right. I guess one should have to rephrase it, because it's so easy to interpret different ways. Is everybody should start with the right intention, right?
Correct.
And having the right intention that we're all people, we all have feelings and hopefully opportunities ahead of us. And how do we support each other with respect and dignity and old-fashioned ways of doing things, and then build that on with inclusiveness, right? With diversity. And what's so valuable about that, if you fly at that level, you're never going to get stopped by a culture, a country boundary, anything, because it translates perfectly and positively in those languages. So the method in which you use will give you a passport to people and places you wouldn't have had if you were too exclusive, if you were already preset. And the nice thing about this show, it moves wherever it has to, and whatever works best goes next. So, Charles?
Yeah, thank you for that, Donna and Brian. I really love the comments about inclusiveness and diversity. A really great idea to go to unliked people that are really different from your point of view. I mean, the research will tell us that diversity in teams and diversity in groups enhances decision making, enhances problem solving, enhances creativity. That's been proven over and over and over again. So absolutely get diversity. And you were talking earlier about being able to listen to failure if failure is sending you a signal. And one of the people one group you should not listen to is the naysayers. So how do you define failure? What does society say about failure? Don't listen to the people who are going to rain on your parade or throw shade on your situation. You know, you're in a failure, you've already got enough shade. What you need is to get people who are going to give you positivity, and they're going to give you, encouragement to learn and to move on. And so we've talked before, Don, about the importance of mentors. And this is one of the reasons why it's so important to have a mentor, someone that you can bounce ideas off of. And when you do have those lows, whether it's a big low, a little low, a medium low, then you've got a mentor that you can pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm in a stall right now. So someone said in the comments a few minutes ago that they were currently in a stall. So I would really encourage that person to reach out and get a mentor. And it could be anyone on this list of people who are watching the LinkedIn Live right now. You could just send them a message privately through LinkedIn and say, hey, I need someone to talk to because I'm in a stall right now. I need to get out of the stall. I need to power up the engines. I need to adjust to the stall the same way a pilot would if the plane is starting to go into a stall.
Well, that's wonderful advice, and I hope people take advantage of it because it's right in front of you right now. The people on the right-hand side are probably your best people because they're here with you now, probably for the same reasons you're here, so you have some things in common. And, it's good practice for those who like to help that get someone they can help. Again, it's all how it's communicated. Right? If it's communicated with respect and acknowledgement that they actually know something about you, like I read your article and it really made me think, or I saw your video and here's the piece I liked most. That's what I would do, is take a little more time for someone else if you don't have the time for yourself, and do something for them you're hoping will come back to you, because on LinkedIn, it's easy to duplicate through others. And you need to be, or should be, the model for others, right? You should be the example for those who don't know how to do it. And what I advise, because we're in the real time doing real conversation with real people, is don't get too far ahead of yourself. Just give yourself enough future that you can deal with it. And then when you deal with that, you'll be in a better position to deal with the next day. I always tell people, if you're in a bad position, the first thing you could do is get back to breathing. That's fundamental, right? Just learn to breathe, focus on that, eat a little something, do little things to nurture yourself while you're going through this. And it's easy for people to say things when they're not in your shoes, because I know a lot of people face disappointment, failure. They think they're the only person that ever this could happen to, and maybe some cases it is. But until, like Charles's point, you talk to people, and your first receipt of what they have to say changes everything or nothing, right? If someone says, boy, you're screwed, there's no way out of this, that will definitely flatten somebody. But if someone says, I've been where you are, I know how this all works out, you know what I mean? And you're going to be okay. And I'm going to be here to help you. Okay. And that's the final thing that people need to know is there's hope. And Bryan, you've been in medicine, I'm sure you've had to deal with situations that you had to encourage people to make changes or do something or accept something. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think, another thing too, building off of what Charles was saying is, I think a lot of people would be surprised at, if you think about lots of different companies, no matter what industry they're in, it could be, people from not just, any level of the company, but I'm just going to say this because I know, because I've been in that position, but people don't realize that a lot of times the highest functioning people at a business, whether they're C executives, whether it's the business owner, whether it's, someone that's very high up in the company, that people assume, oh, this person makes great money, this person is successful, they're doing just fine. Charles mentioned reaching out to a mentor. I think a lot of people don't understand that a lot of these high performing people are this way because they have a coach, right? They have a life coach or a performance coach, or they have someone in their life that is a mentor or that has been there before, and someone that they can lean on and share these things with. And I think it's important to make sure that you separate that from, my wife is a fantastic sounding board and is my biggest supporter, but there's just some things that a mentor or a life coach or a performance coach can offer that someone close to you may not be able to. So I think that was really important what Charles mentioned, that I just think that so many people, as an athlete, I know personally that there's a lot of people who are professional athletes themselves, and they still have personal coaches, that help them learn how to have better time management, learn how to be more intentional in their life. And so I think that having resources and reaching out to someone in a time for need is not a sign of weakness. It really is a sign of strength, and as a physician, as a surgeon, that was something where I was constantly having people come to me, in a very vulnerable state, asking for help, asking for solution. And I just think that having someone in your life that can do that is a really important thing that a lot of people, I think, underestimate, but they really shouldn't.
Charles, you want to?
Well, I think that's excellent distinction between close relationships, personal relationships, and a mentor and a coach. Sometimes you come home after a bad day and you don't need a mentor coach. What you need is just someone to say, yeah, I get it. That was a hard day for you. The mentor coach plays a very distinct role. I think that's a really excellent point, Bryan. Well received on that. And I love your reminder, Dawn, about well-being. So when you do encounter failures, the first thing you need to do is make sure you're looking after your own well-being. Put on your oxygen mask and, look after yourself. Make sure you're getting enough sleep. Make sure you're eating properly, and make sure you're still staying active. And don't allow your physical body to lapse into don't allow your physical body to allow for the stall. You might have a mental stall. You can work against that. Don't allow your physical body to go into the physical stall, because you have a lot of control over your physical body. And the other thing I wanted to say is, being in human resources for most of my career, I get a lot of people who go through, a job loss or something like that. They have something really devastating that happens to them in their job or in their company in some fashion, and they're at a dead end. So they're going to lose their job, they've received their package, or they're going to receive it the next morning, type of thing. And they call me up and they say, what should I do? They're just like, they're in a state of shock. And this is what I say to people. I say to them, and to your point, Dawn, that sometimes people can't hear this, but I say to them, you may not be able to hear this right now, but this will be the best thing that ever happened to you. This will be the best thing that ever happened to you. Just hold on to that and keep going. And that will and people look back afterwards and they say, wow, that was so true, because it just sets up the mindset to relate differently to what's happened to them in their job or into their particular circumstances, and puts them on that path towards positivity. And then the last thing I just want to emphasize is the importance that organizations play in the failure culture. So, the risk is that organizations, so I'm not, maybe this is an assertion, but I'm an observation. I think it would probably, a lot of people would probably agree with me. Organizations are guilty about nurturing the failure culture. And lately, there's a huge amount of talk about the importance of psychological safety and how organizations can create a psychologically safe environment. And the research will tell you that when you have a psychologically safe environment and people feel the freedom to make mistakes, to go that extra little mile, to be inventive, to pirate a little bit of time. If you're in the engineering and the R&D space, a lot of leading companies would encourage that for their researchers. If you encourage that mistake failure culture, then you're going to get greater innovation. So it's another slice of the diversity and inclusion conversation that the two of you mentioned a few minutes ago. So it's really important, if you're in a position of management or leadership in a company, it's really important that you take a stand for psychological safety. And there's one last reason, well, there are many reasons for that, but another reason to emphasize the importance at a department manager leadership level is because the research will tell us that team psychological safety can differ from team to department. So in a large organization with thousands of employees, one manager can have a very psychologically safe department, and another manager, a couple buildings away, can have a psychologically unsafe environment. So it really matters. Empathetic leadership, we come back to it again, really matters at the team department level.
Yeah, and I think that's why culture and environment are going to be so more important as time goes on, and real-time interactions, because now with even this new software where it writes stuff for you, that's going to make people's writing opaque. The question is theirs or someone else's. The only thing you won't question is yourself looking at the mirror right now or looking at a screen right now with other people who are joining you. This is going to get scarcer and scarcer, personal and professional interaction, because everything has made people hibernate, isolate, insulate, protect, defend. Well, nothing's coming in, but then nothing's coming out when you bottle yourself up. And it's so cool what we're providing here, and other shows like this, is an outlet for people on LinkedIn, like a pit stop. It's almost like, hey, if you want to fill up, if you want to get around positive people, if you want to be better for the time spent, and hopefully someone says, well, I redirected that hour to here. Where's another show or a group of people like this? I can put another hour in until I'm fortified. Because when I went through some of my biggest disappointments, the only way that I got out of it the way I did was to get around new people and to get around people more often, right? I joined Toastmasters. I joined, community groups that were inclusive, that were inviting, that were supportive, right? And I think they're all around you. You just have to be available to them and trust yourself that anywhere you go, you'll find less of you there. And anywhere you stay, you'll have all of you there. And at a certain point, that loop isn't changing and it gets frustrating. So, what they say is fail forward is another way of looking at it, right? Don't fail and go back, and don't fail and stand still. This is an opportunity to do something new, different, and exciting. And more importantly, no legacy has to come with you, right? If you can start fresh, and LinkedIn is almost like a new land with a new language, with a new culture. You can be anybody you want and reinvent yourself to be the person you always wanted to be, and see if you can justify it. So, Bryan, what's your thoughts?
I mean, I think another thing I was thinking of while we were talking too is, I think a lot of people, I use a lot of sports analogies, but I think a lot of people always risk, or they always, I shouldn't say risk, they fear failure, right? So a lot of people fear failure, even though we talk about how it can be a learning point, how it can be a perspective shift or a reframe. They fear failure. And so I have a really easy saying, and something that I try to live by, and that is, I tell people, don't fear failure, fear never starting. Because if you are worried about failing, then you never start, you never take action, you never create momentum, and that momentum is never going to give you the results that you want. And ultimately, the results that you want, whether they're financial, whatever they are, what we're all really looking for in life, I think, is more time, right? That's the only resource that we all have that isn't renewable, that you can't make more of. And so I think ultimately, we shouldn't be fearing failure. We should be fearing not starting, because if you sit by on the sidelines and you just let life pass you by, you're never going to score a touchdown. You're never going to, be able to be in a position where you can win because you never really started. And so for me, that's sort of the way I approach every day. It's like, I know that I'm going to make a mistake, right? I joke around. I've been married for 12 years. I've made plenty of mistakes, right? But the key is that if you're not willing to make a mistake and you're not willing to take a risk so that you can start, then you never know what possibilities are really there to begin with. So that's really what I think is the most important thing, is just to start. And like my good buddy Kurt Vonnegut says, sometimes you just have to jump and you can just grow your wings on the way down, right? Because if you wait for your plan in life to be 100% perfect, you will never start, right? So sometimes you just need to get 80% of the way there and then go for it.
I think that's very sound advice. And it reminds me of a quote: is start before you're ready, because you're never going to get ready, right? So Charles?
Yeah, there's a very famous baseball player who said, or maybe it was a coach, Bryan, you might know, who said this, or Don as well: if you don't swing the bat, you'll never hit the ball, right?
Mm-hmm.
And on the item of time, that's a really great point, Bryan, on time. And I want to add something to that, is that if you do find yourself in the middle of a failure, that what I called before that stall period, when you start to go into that sort of stalling period, what you can do is you can actually use that to leverage the failure to your advantage. So when people call me up, for example, if they've lost a job, I say to them, don't let the current period of unemployment go to waste. There's so many things you could do. You could get onto LinkedIn. To your point, Don, you can get onto LinkedIn. You can start writing articles. You can start doing posts. Everybody has skills. Everybody has skills, whether it's your professional skills or your hobby skills. Everyone has skills. You can bring those skills to the party. You can bring them onto a platform like LinkedIn, and you can have a voice for yourself. And then later, when you're talking to employers, or if it's a business failure, talking to venture capitalists, you can say, hey, after that failure, it didn't go to waste. I learned from it, I leveraged from it, and I'm better from it.
Well, if you look at opportunity, there's two people. One is someone who's never been successful for whatever reason, is determined now's their time. And the other one is someone who's been successful, lost it all, and says, now I'm going to even get it back twice as well because I've been through it once. And, if you look at everything as a continuum and not an outcome, right? Because most people base failure on a number, on a date, on a deadline, and they missed it or didn't get it. And what happens tomorrow? So, if you were your own judge, wouldn't you pardon yourself as early as you could, get yourself out there again, not pass sentence? Because, it's all relative. If you say I failed, how long am I going to have to suffer the failure twice, right? Which is the incident, and then the embarrassment, the shame. And at the end of the day, who are you living your life for? Right. And I think that's so important, because so many people are competitive with lack of self-esteem, that they say, oh, Joe got a 6,000 square foot house, I got to go for 8, or someone's got this car and I got to get that. And the problem with that is all those people are looking up and not down. They're looking at where they're yet to be instead of where they've been. And it's all gratitude. I was listening to an Audible by a gentleman named Dr. Waddles. And actually, he was a famous personal improvement gentleman in 1910. And it's the original, how to be rich or something, whatever it was. But the cool thing is through time, the game is always between you and yourself, and once you can get out of your own way, you have your true voice. And I think that's what's so important, is everybody should have an opportunity to have their true voice be heard, have themselves be seen the way they want to. And so many people weren't a Shakespeare before they joined LinkedIn. They're not going to be a Shakespeare the next day when they do anything on LinkedIn, and start with where you are, who you are, what you have, and do more of it, because that's how you're going to get better. When I did the show for the first time, I knew it was just me because I was the only one who hit the button that day. And I knew nobody was going to see it. Nobody was going to comment on it. I could have said it's a failure. But what I did say, it can only get better from here, right? And if all you can say is it's only going to get better from here, you're done, right? The mourning is over. The grieving is over. Accept it. I think more people should take responsibility, right? And not look for who to blame, because you'll be blaming them forever and not yourself. Take accountability, right? Square the transaction, and say, I'm on my way again. Bryan?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's true. And, we're talking a lot about, failure and success and overcoming adversity. And I remember my dad, who passed a few years ago, he used to always tell me, and he may have gotten this from someone else, but I think it's important to mention too, that, throughout all these failures, all these successes, and all these things that we're doing, I always remembered him telling us that, on the way up, or on your way as you are climbing this journey through your career, and as you're becoming more successful, or you're having more wins, just remember that the people that you pass on the way up are the same people that you're going to pass on the way down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's an important thing to really remember, because as we sit here and talk about failure, you have to remember that during this time in life, you have, sometimes some people will give you 1, 2, maybe 3 opportunities to, wrong them, or, use them for sort of personal gain. And so I think it's really, really important to remember that, because I know for me personally in my career, there's been several times where I've made a career pivot, and I was so thankful that these people who helped encourage me on the way up, who were part of my journey on the way up, that I never forgot that, because then when I shifted a career and had to start, or I was on my way down, they were right there again, and they still came to my aid, and they still helped me. So I think that's one thing that's just really important too, is to never really forget those that helped us on our way up, and definitely don't burn bridges, because you never know when you may have to take another stab at something, and you just want to make sure that you have as many people in your corner as you can.
Well, I think that's profound and valuable. And, what I realize is you do meet the same people on the way down as you do on the way up. And, the most important thing is to know not to put all your eggs in one basket either, right? So not everything is depending on success or failure on the occupation or the investment, so it tells you to be a little more conservative in that regard. And the saying I always believe in is you learn more on the way down than you do on the way up, right? Because on the way down, you get humbled. On the way up, you think you're God's gift to the business world if things are going good, or everything you touch is going to turn to gold. And when you're young, you are kind of dumb in some ways, but when all of a sudden the tide turns, either for no reason that you had anything to do with, but hey, you're it. It is really hard to take. I find there's a lot of fair weather winners out there, right? When the sun's shining and everything's great, they're perfect. But when the clouds come in and starts to rain, they don't know how to deal with it, right? And at that point, they're lost. And the people who have failed early, I'll say one thing, is that you learn for a longer period of time, and it means more. Right? If you lose $1 when you're 6 years old, that dollar is going to hurt you so much more then than if you lost $1 now. And so adversity is a teacher. Failure is an opportunity to know that, there's another saying, if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much room. The edge is where you get the best view. The edge is where there's the most energy. And to Bryan's point, you do learn to grow wings on the way down before you hit the ground, and it's so cool how that happens, because that saying, necessity is the mother of invention. It's amazing what people can do when they have to do it, when there's no thought. I mean, how many women pick up a car if their kid's under it? And no one can explain how that could possibly happen, right? Because your thought goes away and your impulse takes over. So, Bryan?
Yeah, I mean, it's there's lots of stories like that, you know, out there with that sort of superhuman strength. And I think, you know, there's been a few people in the comments, and I think maybe Charles even mentioned this too, about how, you know, it's so important to surround ourselves with positive and with good people. And I think, you know, in today's society, in today's world, where I'm not going to even think about getting into politics or anything like that, right? I know better than that. But I think what's so important nowadays is that it's really one of those times where, you know, the people that I want to be around are sort of the ones that, when the rest of the world and when the rest of society and when everything else in my life is walking out, those few people that walk in, you know, when you're at your lowest, the people that come around when you've had that big mishap, or the ones that come around when you were at the pinnacle of your career and now you're not, those are the ones that I think are important to keep close, and are the ones that are important to sort of foster those relationships with. I think a lot of times we surround ourselves with people who are very, very successful, or what we define as successful. But I'm not making a blanket statement, but a lot of times people who are in that realm may not really be there for you when you're not successful anymore, right? So Matthew McConaughey says to pay attention to the people in the room that aren't clapping when you're winning the biggest award of your life. And so I think it's really, really important to surround yourself with those people that are willing to step up for you when you're not making all those wins, when you're not super successful, when you're not, you know, in the best place in your life. When those people walk in, that I know are going to truly be by me through it all the way. So.
Yeah, I think that's so important, because I did a lot of turnarounds, restructurings, and those are pretty difficult, especially when it comes to the people side. And, you know, through that whole process, I found that if people become more resourceful, you know, understand that they're going to have to make so many different changes in their career, in their relationships as time goes forward, everything is accelerating. So why not be in that mode of having that support system? Because I know in some cases, when I thought some people would always be there for me, I was so surprised when they weren't. And I was so surprised when I didn't know people were there for me that showed up. And if you allow people to come into your life as well as leave your life, who are, you know, I've always been a big believer. I'm only a fan of individuals who are a fan of me, right? So I'd rather go to my grandson's basketball game than go to a Denver Nuggets game, you know? And it's the same thing with the group here. These are the people are showing up for people. Here are the people extending their open hand, saying, if you're in trouble, call me. If you want help, get involved with this group. Because we all know this is too big for any one of us, no matter how strong, how successful you are. And at the end of the day, one has to determine what is success and failure. And in my mind, it all comes down to happiness, right? If at the end of the day, you're really happy with yourself and happy with what you're doing and who you're with, you're there, right? I'm not into overreaching, you know? And here's the other thing I think that Bryan and Charles are really pointing out. You need balance. Success in one area doesn't guarantee success in all areas, right? And there's a point where you got to be the coach to take you out of the game, right? I mean, and that's what a coach is for, to say, hey, you're running on, you're redlining here, you know, you're doing too much and you're neglecting what's most important to you. And, you know, I've been fortunate to go on 45 years of being married and having 2 wonderful kids and grandkids. Is at the end of the day, that's who's going to be there for you if you're set up properly. You know, I'll tell you one thing. I was going through one of the worst business situations of my life, and there were days I had to crawl out of there. It was so rough, you know. that you just had to get out the door and freshen up for the next day. And on the way home, I was so overwhelmed. But what was so cool, when I opened the door from the garage, my 2-year-old grabbed one leg, my 5-year-old grabbed the other leg, the dog was barking, my beautiful wife was making a lovely meal and smiling. And I said to myself, like a revelation, I'm the richest person in the world right now, you know? And how many people have this joy that just coming home, everybody's excited that you're here. And usually when you fail, you end up going home. And that's right. You get laid off a job or something loses, you're home. Who are you with? And this is a way of building a second family, adding a second home. That's admirable. Bryan?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you mentioned, sometimes it's those simple things, in life that it's like talking about success and what's successful for people. It's those that are there for you. And I really do think that LinkedIn has been a great community for me during that time. And, it doesn't even have to be anything really that's that special at all. I mean, I'm sure Charles can vouch for this. I'm sure Don can, and lots of people that are in the audience. It's, that one little direct message that you get, that one text message, because everyone that's here on this, not just this show, but on LinkedIn, there's a small percentage of people that actually post content. And I can say for sure that if there's someone that's not commenting, they're not reacting, I have so many people that reach out to me that say that, they've started doing things in their life. They started doing this, they started doing that. And I never even knew that they were there. And so there's always someone who you're impacting in some sort of way. And so I think that even if what you're putting out there, you think, maybe the post didn't do well, you're still helping. And even if it's just that one person, I think it's so profound to just keep moving forward and keep things in that perspective. And I think, I'm kind of a nerd and I love to read and I love the old, Stoic sort of philosophers. And one of the original Diogenes one of the philosophers, Diogenes, he had this great quote, and he said that he has the most who is the most content with the least, right? And so I think it's one of those things where in our society today, things are digital, they're overcomplicated. It's generation now, right? Fast, fast, fast. We want everything to happen so quick. And so I think sometimes it's just about taking a step back and maybe redefining what success is to you, or what success really is, because all of us think that in order to be happy in life, that we need to have more of something. But sometimes the more that you have, it brings in more stress. It brings in more distraction. It brings in more complication. And so sometimes I just remind myself that life is really just about having what you need and having, what is relevant, not necessarily what you want.
Well, I think that's so good because what you need determines a lot of what you have to do, right? If you can minimize your needs, and that's where minimalism comes in, then you can choose a career that may be not as materialistically successful, but something that aligns and speaks to your heart and soul and makes you want to get excited to wake up every day. So one has to wonder, because I had all of that other stuff. But what I found out is that when you have a lot of stuff has you, right? And it takes maintenance and it takes support and insurance and all these things to protect it. And if you're so busy working for it, you never have a chance to enjoy it. What's 3 cars in a garage when no one's driving them? What's a big house when you spend 80% of your time and 20% of the space, And then what do you want to do? Maintain a house or maintain yourself? So if you put yourself first, what do you need to be as successful as you can? Because I always believe do the work and then you get the benefit, not get the benefit and figure out how to pay for it with some work. And that's where people get into a trap, because now all of a sudden I gotta give up club membership, right? If I lose my job, I gotta give up the status stuff that was there. So I think it does put things in perspective, in that most people are just disorganized with the wrong priorities with the amount of time they spend. And I think this week's takeaway was you want to make a positive change, redirect action, redirect thought, and redirect relationships, right? And you're always balancing what do you need for this situation. It's like a play. Everybody gets their lines, everybody gets their costumes, everybody gets to understand when they come and go. And that's, you're producing your own play. What role are you playing? What support actors, what costume designers are you using? And this is getting to be what they call a Hollywood employment situation, where people come together for a purpose and an activity. And when it's over, they all go to wherever the next thing is, right? And that's how collaboration should work. Bryan?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think I'd be really interested too to see what Charles has to say on that topic about collaboration as well.
Charles?
Yeah, I think that, well, it's critical, right? The collaboration brings us back to the whole idea of diversity and inclusion, and we're better together. Remember that when I'll say that again, we're better together. And it's, it's very, very important when you're talking about that reflective aspect on, when you're talking about everything you said about reflection in the last couple of minutes. It's really important that while you're going through that you also write things down, because writing crystallizes thought. It helps you to get your thoughts out of your head. You can visualize it, and there's a lot of research around people who have written goals. I mean, like writing them down. I don't mean putting them on a mobile device, although that's one way to do it. But the better way to do it is to actually write something down on a piece of paper and reflect on it and scribble on it and doodle on it and use different colors and really get out of your head what your goals are and return to those goals. So people who write down their reflections and write down their goals are more likely to be successful and more likely to take action on it. But totally agree on the point of collaboration. And one of the people in the comments mentioned, I don't know who the individual was, but it says, I wish I knew what success means to me. So again, you're in a community right now where there's lots and lots of people who would want to be supportive, and you can reach out to them and get someone who will just mentor you through some success defining conversations. And success is individual. It's to your point, Don, it's what's important to each one of us. Society sure dictates success, but really success is what is in our heart, what's important to us. And it's critical also to have those boundaries. Although I'm sure my family, if they were listening right now, would roll their eyes and say, yeah, right, here's the pot calling the kettle black. But it's important to have those boundaries so that when you do have those days, you can go home and wash off the work and be with that loving family and those supportive friends that can help you to control the network and change the narrative to be positive.
Well, I think too, having a good sense of humor goes a long way too, because some things are so from out of the blue, you almost have to laugh at what are the odds? How many times have you said to yourself, what's the odds of this happening? Could be just meeting a friend in a new place or something you haven't seen in a while, whatever you might call a coincidence. But I always believe there's something more than I'll ever know when something is happening, right? It's almost like the first chapter. It's like, okay, now, and again, you get to produce your own show. Do you want to have a life that's a comedy, that's a romance, that's a horror show, And also, everybody has had so much success in their life at times. It could have been getting an award for riding your bicycle. It could have been somebody who recognized you and gave you credit. And why not, take that time to be that again, to remember that again, right? Exchange an embarrassing moment for a positive one and a historical one. And remember the people who allowed you to be who you are. Og Mandino, great personal development individual, he always kind of ended his talks with, if you're depressed and don't think life is right for you, take out yesterday's obituaries and see who would change places with you, And when you realize that life is there right now for you, and you could do any little thing you want to make yourself a little happier, you have a responsibility to others to make yourself as happy and successful as you are, because everything ripples. And I just want to recognize we've got so many people here. I mean, honestly, I haven't been able to keep up with the comments. I mean, there hasn't been a time there isn't a comment that keeps coming through. And you know what it shows is people are resonating with this. People are actually responding with activity. And I think the common thread here is the answer to whatever you want is through action. Thought is great and necessary, but I really approach the plan, do, review thing, right? And a lot of people don't plan, just do. They're so busy doing, they don't review it. They don't have a plan for it except to chase it, because it's getting outside of themselves. And because most people are dealing with scarcity, any opportunity is more opportunity. But when you have 5 opportunities at the same time, you really need to prioritize. And especially on LinkedIn and messaging, it's so hard to get visibility on LinkedIn with 900 million people. The crowd is out there posting, commenting, liking. And how do you differentiate and distinguish yourself? Well, you get a bigger microphone on a stage most people haven't found yet, and most people don't know how to approach. And that's where this wide openness is, because it's really, there's a saying, be known before you're needed. Get top of mind awareness, get exposure. And I think it's great advice. What I did when I came here is I didn't have anybody. Everybody starts with 0. How long you want to be there is up to you. I just started commenting on some of the people who I love what they were doing, love what they were saying, and now was one of 200 in that group already. And all you got to do is climb the ladder to look at what everybody else said this day and know you can add 2 more lines and be the best comment of the day for this person. And if you string 3 or 4 of those together, it'll allow you to have a conversation as a peer-to-peer fellow supporter versus somebody in need reaching up for someone to help you. Charles, what's your thoughts?
I absolutely agree. If you want to differentiate yourself on LinkedIn, start by creating content. So I think the statistic, Bryan, that you were referencing earlier is about only 1 to 3% of those more than 900 million people actually create content. Yeah. And what the world needs right now is inspiring, encouraging, diverse, and inspiring, encouraging content. And diversity, inclusion, and psychological safety are very, very topical right now on people's minds on LinkedIn. It's very interesting to see how the content on LinkedIn is shifting. So everyone has skills, everyone has something to contribute. Everyone's been through highs and lows. What did you hear from your highs and lows? Share, capture that in writing and share that on LinkedIn, and that'll immediately differentiate you and
I think
about the crowd. Go ahead, Bryan.
Yeah. And I think too, just piggybacking off that, it's what's really amazing to me is, and this again, right, this is just me speaking in my opinion, but we see so much on LinkedIn, and there's value here for some people clearly. But the distinction I like to make is people will always talk about LinkedIn. They'll write these, 800-page carousels, which, you might as well write a novel at that point, or they'll constantly talk about Chat GPT, right? And we see all these things get so much traction on LinkedIn. And, oftentimes I wonder, okay, well, Microsoft owns Chat GPT, so of course, right, whatever. But the point is that as the writer, as the content creator, or as I like to think of myself as a storyteller, right? Because I'm really not creating anything at all. All I'm doing is sharing a story, what I like to call public journaling, or I'm just giving you guys a piece of me and hoping that maybe those lessons that I went through can avoid someone having that failure or can help them have a success. And so the way I think about it is, as writers, we create and we write and we tell the story. The audience determines the value of the story. Okay. So when you see all these people tell you, you have to write valuable content, you have to write educational content, you have to bring value to everything that you write. Okay. I mean, for instance, at nighttime, right, when it's real late at night, maybe 8 p.m. Central Time, the kids are down for sleep, people are relaxing, people are taking it easy. I don't want to see a 500-page carousel about how you made $300,000 in the first 2 seconds that you founded your solopreneur business. I don't care about that. It's a lie, and it's not true anyways. What I want to see is, what do you like to do on Saturday night? What do you do for the weekend? You know, what kind of things do you like to do to have fun, right? And so how do you create community, right? So for instance, it's totally random, but you know, a lot of people like to give Brock Pearson, who's a good buddy of mine that just popped up in the comments, a lot of people like to give Brock a hard time like they do to me, and they'll say that I don't bring any value here. Well, you know what's interesting is when I go out there and make a post about a grilled cheese sandwich, and that post gets 800,000 impressions, I can tell you one thing, for some reason, grilled cheese has a lot of value to certain people. So what I tell everybody is the most beautiful thing about LinkedIn is when you write something, it's going to resonate with somebody. And as long as you are being related to them, as long as you are being authentic, raw, you're sending a genuine message, there are so many people that are going to relate to that, okay? Don't listen and don't be dissuaded to be yourself and not post something that someone else on LinkedIn says has no value. You don't have to be selling a product. You don't have to be telling people how to build a $400 trillion business overnight. You don't have to tell people that you have to meditate on your head for 20 hours while drinking kale juice and a cold plunge to be healthy, okay? You don't have to tell people that. All you have to do is share something from right here, and that will connect with enough people. And the more that you start to share genuine things, the more people that will come around, and good finds good. So sorry to go on a little rant there, but it's just, I see so much on LinkedIn where there's a lot of posts that I think make it challenging for people that want to start, because they see these continual posts talking about how everything you do here has to bring value. Who determines the value? The audience determines the value, right? And the only way you know that is by experimenting, by posting. If it doesn't work, shift, adapt, change. Anyways, that's yeah, sorry to go on a rant, but
No, I think it was excellent
Great rant.
information. I do hope everybody listened to it, because you know I've done a post every day for 3 years, haven't missed a day. That's 1,000 days, you know, and I built a pretty good community. But what I learned is when you got here, no, LinkedIn didn't give you the rule book. There is no book on what you do here. And what I found is people are so focused on content and not distribution of content. You know, I was talking to a gentleman this week who actually is going to be on Thursday's show, Brett Packard, who's an amazing gentleman, international in so many ways, very successful. And he said the key to his LinkedIn success was he talked to someone and said, you're spending 80% of your time on content and 20% of your time on taking action with that content. Once he switched it around, everything started to change. And I'll tell you, my program, my message is the same message until I come up with a better message. It doesn't change by the day. I repurpose everything. I do 3 posts a day, a poll, a LinkedIn Live. I tag 100 people and whatever else I do. And I've got it down to taking yesterday's and upgrading it, right? When you go to a movie show, they don't change the show with the movie. They change the marquee, right? They don't change the place. You want to make it dependable. And people just want to know what's going on right now that I can use. Right? And they come for what you give or share, but they stay for you. Once they get to know you as the person, all of a sudden you become a shining light, hopefully, in their life, and they become a shining light in yours. And we're on virgin ground here. No one else has done this. No one's done this 7 months every day, which means everybody can learn faster. And maybe, you know, here's a key and something to keep in mind. Is when you enter something, your excitement level is as high as it's going to be, and your knowledge level is as low as it's going to be. If your knowledge doesn't start to increase, your excitement will start to decrease, and you'll meet both of those at the bottom, and you'll be gone. right? So it's like a tractor pull, if you ever seen those things, you know? Eventually that tractor is going to get stood up. The question is, how far can it get, you know, before that happens? And that's where going with a coach, going with someone who's been there, and I know it works because here's what's so true about LinkedIn. Every day you get same day results. Whatever you do, they're going to tell you how many people looked at it, how many people commented, how many people liked, and more importantly, to get away from vanity numbers, it's really relevancy, right? I could pick 300 people right now and give up the other 37,000, I'd be just fine. And I know someone who actually did that, so their feed wouldn't get so cluttered, right? The requests and demands wouldn't be so frequent. And they were just focusing on those people anyways, and that was the sort, right? And if they had a button say remove all of this, I probably would in a lot of ways. But I think people think, well, I just did it yesterday, everybody saw it. Well, if 8 people commented it out of 900 million people, I don't think they saw it. I don't think, and you know what? I've never ever said, oh boy, they posted this before, I'm never going to speak to these people. Go ahead, Bryan.
Yeah, it's amazing. The repurposing of the content, and I know probably Charles and you can speak to this more than me because I've only been here for like 9 months, but I can tell you that there's lots of studies in the, the scientific and the medical literature that talks about, how much stuff people truly remember. And I'm not saying this right here as a dig at all, because this is just factual information, but literally 60% of the US population has a educational level that they are able to navigate a bus or a train schedule, right? There's nothing wrong with that. That's just the facts. With that being said, the majority of people don't remember what they had for lunch yesterday or the day before. That's just the truth, right? We don't remember what we wore the day before. And so every time that you post on LinkedIn, regardless of whether you use hashtags or no hashtags, like 70% of your network is not going to see what you post. Of the people that see what you post, most of them are going to look at the picture or the video and skim the post. They're not really going to read it. And so for a lot of the successful storytellers, creators, influencers, marketers, whatever you want to call them, that are here, very, very few people are going to remember what you said a week ago, much less 6 months ago. And so there's only so many ways that things can be said. And I think where you really start to set yourself apart, and like I said, Charles may be able to comment on this, is when you look through your posts, and LinkedIn's built-in analytics are getting much, much better, as you guys know. So when you look through your posts and you see your top impressions or your top engagement posts for, say, the last 365 days, you would be silly to not take top performing posts, and even if you tweak them very little, or you swap a picture, or you change the hook, or you change the call to action, if you have posts that are performing at hundreds of thousands of impressions, that means that it resonated with the audience. But remember, it resonated with a very small percentage of the audience that actually saw it. So why not use that again, right? It's sort of like a great company that has a marketing slogan that they use for 30 years at a time, right? It's like milk does a body good, right? Taco Bell used to have a great slogan. All these companies used to have these fantastic marketing slogans, and the reason they used them over and over and over again is because they worked. So why would we approach things any differently here? So I think for me, where it changed, where my game changed here a lot, is where I realized the messages that I sent out that performed well because the audience wanted to hear them. So maybe I'll share them again.
Yeah, and I'm doing the same. I went from 2,000 impressions a day to 6,000 impressions a day in 28 days, and I didn't change what I did. I just changed how I did it, right? And unless you're working in a vacuum, everything is dynamic around you. You don't have to be even more dynamic because that's more complicating. So when things are more complex, it's a good tendency to get simpler, to get down to a common denominator, to a single focus, because content on LinkedIn, typically, if you watch or read some of the great content providers is about having pillars that support their content, right? And they say don't get beyond 2 or 3 pillars. I focus on one. And that pillar is everything you talk about when you talk about something, right? If that's what you're into, that's what you want everybody to know. Yesterday's conversation was based on what's your message, right? If someone was to stop you right now on LinkedIn and say, what's the most important thing you need to know or you want someone to know? You should say, well, I'm in the middle of this and I need this, right? Or I want to hear this, or I want to learn this, or I want to teach this. You should always have your message ready because that's the thing you put up front. And actually, Charles was responsible for the theme today and how to take advantage of failure, in essence. And that created the change in the post. It was the top 2 lines. Everything else was the same because you know what? Everything else was what I believed yesterday and I still believe today. You know, if my beliefs were like a feather in the wind that every day I can come up with a top 10 list that had nothing to do with yesterday's top 10, you know, people want consistency. People want when they open up a ketchup bottle for ketchup to come out, right? Not to be surprised. And I think people get mixed up and confused when you're talking about this today and oh, it's not what you're thinking. It's what you want to help other people think with that you're providing them, right? This is a starting point. This is a pivot point. And it's a comment point. So many people don't respond. You're hurting yourself. When someone says something that says, boy, that made me think, and the comments on the right are showing that. Well, why not tell the person that really made me think, thank you. Now that takes about 30 seconds and it's right at top of mind. What is stopping your mind to your fingers for doing that? And after you do that, to Charles's point and to Bryan's point, and actually this week, Brett, who made a career out of journaling, and now he's got like 80 books he can write just from his everyday journals through 35 years of international banking, you know, and that's where repurposing comes in. All of the experiences you paid dearly for, you can give for free to people who may now avoid those, or more importantly, who are going through those, say, hey, if Jim could do it and this is how he did it, I can do it. Because once you believe you can, everything changes. It's your belief, I can't, I'm screwed, I'm finished. You know, you keep layering on and you smother yourself with yourself. So what's your thoughts, Bryan? I know we're coming towards the end, but you know, we still got people here.
Yeah. I think for me, the one thing that I'd like to mention too is it's definitely there's so much power here in building this community on LinkedIn. You know, it's just really opened up a lot of doors for me too, just in the short time that I've been here. And I think the big thing is, you know, and a lot of people say this and it may sound corny or cheesy or whatever, but I really do think that, you know, I look at LinkedIn as sort of like an investment, you know, like our retirement, in the sense that it's so much more important, everything that you put in and everything, you know, I like to say, you know, bring to LinkedIn more than you really take away from LinkedIn, because, you know, karma and kindness are really good friends. And so at the end of the day, if you're here to serve others and you're here to do that, you know, without any sort of expectation, you know, and you build a real engaged community, then I really think that's where it's at. And if you just scroll your feed, you know, and I'm not saying this to toot my own horn or whatever, but since I've been here, it hasn't mattered how much I've grown. I typically will always have far, far more commenting on my posts than I do reactions, right? And so you'll see a lot of people that have 1,200 reactions and 30 comments. And that's either that they're in a pod, or it's that they don't have an engaged audience because they're talking to their audience and they're not talking with their audience, right? People don't want to be lectured at, they want to be talked with, right? They want to feel part of the conversation. And so that's what I really think is what's really powerful about LinkedIn, is making your audience, making your viewer, making the reader feel like what you're saying speaks to them in a way that they want to reciprocate and be part of the conversation, right? The old days of just posting on LinkedIn, posting some information and then walking away and using it sort of as like a podium, I think is, at least for me, not the best approach to take. And so, with all that being said, and with the community sort of that I built, I do have to sort of make a little plug here and let everyone know that, my goal moving forward, with LinkedIn is, I think, living a life with, intention and purpose, and being able to sort of have this mental wellness, this physical wellness, eating right, connecting to nature, keeping life simple is something that I'm really passionate about, and something that in the next few probably days, I'm going to be launching a performance coaching program where, if there's anyone that needs to find a way to take back time in their life, to be more intentional and more purposeful in their life, and just to live a life with passion and to be able to serve those people around them, then that's something I'd love to help you guys with. So please feel free to reach out to me, and see what we can do.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I would reach out to everybody who's participating today. Check out their profile. You might be surprised. Hopefully there's some alignment. I know there's some questions. Every one of these LinkedIn Lives post on my profile every day. So you can go back and see 200 in a row if you want to binge one day. I don't, that's a lot. The other thing is, for anybody's LinkedIn Live, you can catch it on their profile. So if you're a connection, LinkedIn may notify you when it happens. I try to post the night before, pre-post the day of. But if you ever want to see anybody's LinkedIn Live, just come to their profile. It's playing. You can enter it right there. And a lot of people don't know about it. And I encourage more people to get on more shows and try it, because you'll like it. And you'll find out a lot of your fears weren't founded. It is easier in getting in my opinion, 1,000 people on a public stage, when you're sitting alone on the podium and looking at everybody, versus, to me, it's just like the conversation me and Charles and Bryan had prior to going live. When we flipped the switch, it just brought us live. It didn't change the subject. And the comfort level is so key for two areas. One is who you're with on the show, and then who's in the audience. If everybody was throwing tomatoes at us, it would be a tough show, and it would take away from it. But if everybody's throwing roses, and finding out that everybody got touched in a certain way that made them a little better, made them feel a little bit better, made them say, maybe I'll tune in tomorrow. Maybe I'll check Bryan out, or Charles, or Linda, or any of these wonderful people, because they took the same time as you did today to redirect what they were going to do or could have done to be here. It's our obligation to fill them with enough value to make this a better day than it would have been without us. The definition of leadership is having people do what they couldn't or wouldn't do without you. It's not what you do, it's what you allow other people to do. And you know what? The stronger everybody gets, the stronger the community gets. And you want people to go off and say, I did something, and here's what I learned. I want to bring it back and share it with everybody. Because you never forget the people who gave you your first shot. You never forget the people. I've had people have done things for me, and I couldn't even understand why they did it. And I asked them. And typically the answer was, because I can. Or because I know where you are. I was there. I want to help you. You're worth it. So not everybody who's giving is in the same position as getting. They love to be able to take things that they have a lot of and share with others who are deserving and who are appreciative. And more importantly, I had a partner that at the end, it just kind of turned everything over to me after 12 years. And I asked him, how do I ever take care of you? He says, find somebody like yourself and do what I did for you. And that was his answer, and then you'll have taken care of all of us. Lillian's here, Nicole's here. Nicole's a big hit. It's great to have fans. If your time hasn't come for getting on the stage and getting your medal, isn't it great when someone that you're working with and see every day does? Because it proves it. To me, everything here is like popcorn. It's not a matter will you pop, it's a matter when and who are you with when you're popping. And if you can simplify it to popcorn, I guess everything is easy to do. Final words, Charles. I know we're a little bit over. I'm a little more respectful of end of hour during the week when people actually are, let's say, doing more career professional things. This has been a great show. What do you think, Charles?
Yeah, I think it's been a great discussion. I've really, really enjoyed it. I made a couple of notes here just to contribute to some of the ideas that the two of you have shared in the last few minutes. One of them is that on creation of content, content is very much like the fashion industry. You know, it used to be the case that the fashion industry had 4 seasons: spring, summer, fall, winter, and manufacturers and designers had 3 months to respond to trends. But now the fashion industry, everything is so fast. The fashion industry season is 365 days a year. And if H&M figures out that something's selling really well yesterday and today, I bet you they're going to promote it tomorrow. And if that dips in sales tomorrow, then it's going to be off the shelves and something else will be in its place. So content is the same way. Really want to listen to what Bryan has said about being creative and how you nurture content, and be willing to be agile and test things out a couple of times and see how they go. People will always remember how they feel. They may not remember the 800-page carousel, but they'll remember how you felt out of your post or your content. That's really, really important. One thing, this is a little bit off topic. I'll make this really quick, Don, but and I apologize. I'm probably going to get the name wrong here. But Sarah Kasabian has made a comment about the abuse of DEI, and I think that is also something for us in a position of influence to keep in mind. And I refer to it, and sometimes my colleagues refer to it, as the weaponization of DEI. And it's when we use DEI for inauthentic purposes, and it's just really important. DEI is all about authenticity and talking straight, and we just have to keep that in mind. So Sarah, I hear what you're saying. That's a topic for another day, but I acknowledge your comment there. And perspective is really, really, really important. When you have failure, when you have those lows, those down times, it's really important to maintain perspective. And don't give up, don't get discouraged. Remember, if you're having a bad day today, reach out to your supportive community, whether it's your immediate family or your family here on LinkedIn or your friends on LinkedIn. Don't get discouraged. Your day will come. Good times are ahead.
That's very empowering, Bryan.
Yeah, I think the most important thing too for me to just leave everybody with is, whether you're creating on LinkedIn, whether you're connecting on LinkedIn, whether you're selling on LinkedIn, whatever your reason is for being here, the time to start is honestly yesterday, because as Charles mentioned, there's 900 million people here. It's growing more and more every day. The amount of influx of people coming to LinkedIn with the way the job market is, with the way other social media has sort of lost its way, and LinkedIn, in my opinion, this is the only place I am, but I think it is just the place to be now. And so even though it seems like, LinkedIn has been around for 20 plus years, people here creating content and not just using it as a resume board is very, very recent. And so they always tell you to build your brand, build your image, create your voice, get your message out there before you actually need it. And so I think one of the best things I ever did was come here and just start sharing. So if there's anyone that is not ready to share or not convinced that it's time to share, just start. Even if you start in the comments, even if you start just by supporting other people, this is a powerful platform. And, I've traveled to other countries already, to other states, and connected with friends here that I've then taken and made friends off the screen. And so you don't know where those relationships are going to go. And so my closing message is just not underestimate the power of LinkedIn. I think it's very different than other social media, and just remember that.
Yeah, I think that everywhere, we're saying the same thing, although we've experienced different things and different situations on LinkedIn. We all know that being kind, respectful, authentic are essential. And why not? If you're proud, be loud, and if you're going through a situation, share it. Make a comment and make a post out of it, but don't make it like, woe is me. Give people enough reason to want to reach out, and help you or share with you. And there's one thing that's so powerful about writing things down. Brian Tracy always had something he'd do at the first of the year. He'd write down 10 of the things he wanted to accomplish. and put it in his drawer and open it a year later. And just the power of writing those 10 things down, he would always find that 7 or 8 of those he accomplished. And he didn't put it on his bathroom mirror or his refrigerator and look at it every day. And there's nothing wrong with that. But, once you let it out, it's like, how do you put the toothpaste back in the tube, right? You can't. And once you see it, in reality, it gets less harmful. And the more you share it, eventually you get to the point where you're almost laughing about it because you took the sting out of it. You took the air out of the bubble. And now it's what it should have been a long time ago. Yesterday's news. So, yeah, I think that change is so easy now because it's happening so fast in so many ways. If you get on the right side of change, like I say, if I was coming to LinkedIn the first day, I would comment before I'd post, and I would start doing a LinkedIn Live with anybody I could find who would want to do it with me, right? Because of telling your story is so important, and the numbers came out the last few weeks. A LinkedIn Live is 24 times more comments than an organic video, which is 5 times more than a text post. And these are LinkedIn numbers. So it's 120 times as powerful. And they don't tell you how little or how much you can do of it. I could be doing LinkedIn Lives until I go to sleep tonight if I chose to, right? You can do 15 a day. They want you to. They want that 3% who are putting content to be 3% more. And that would be 27 more million people. And now you'd be at 6%. There are so much talent and so much resources. It's accessibility and connectivity that will bring that together. Peer-to-peer is where everything's going. Decentralized, help yourself by choosing someone right now who's available to you right now. And all of a sudden things will change. And hopefully, to wrap it all up, failure won't be a topic we'll be talking about as much as success from failure, because that's the beauty. It's the before is great, but the after makes everything put itself into perspective as here's what I looked like before I started eating spinach instead of hamburgers, or here's how I felt when I did something. People love that tragedy to triumph. If you've got the tragedy, you've got the worst half already in place, right? Now manufacture, create your triumph. Tell your story to yourself before it even you go to work on it. Have a journey. Do you ever pick up a book that you hope never ends, but you can't wait to see the next page at the same time? Have a life like that you can't wait to get going in the morning, where Mondays are your favorite day of the week. So I think hopefully we brought a lot of insight, encouragement, inspiration, but whatever we brought, I feel really good about this show because it just shows you when you bring people together as co-hosts. But more importantly, I think to Bryan's point, I love sitting right next to somebody as the audience, right? I would rather be one of equal to 50 than one on top and 49 that are listening, because first of all, I don't like being the thing. One last perspective is when you make everything about it and not you, it always works out better, right? Because then you don't take things personally, and it models. Everybody is looking for successful people to say, tell me how you did it, right? Tell me how I can do it. Or more importantly, can we do it? And it's the we taking over the me that's going to make the difference. So with that said, I want to thank Bryan. I want to thank Charles. Love to have part 2. I know people are talking about it already. And again, if this made a hit with you, comment, reach out to Charles, reach out to Bryan, reach out to all the people here. They're quality, almost filtered and curated individuals, that you should feel safe. And they're the ones saying, ring me up. So anyways, have a wonderful weekend. We'll be back tomorrow with Kelly, and really appreciate it. So for now, take care.